Let's talk about 9 tricks the police love to use to arrest you. When dealing with the police, you need to always be conscious and aware of your rights and do everything you can to protect those rights and not waive any of them. When facing police interrogation, it's always important to remember that silence is your best friend. In almost every situation, the best thing you can do is simply keep your mouth closed. The police love to try to encourage you to talk, but remember, anything you say can and will be used against you in court. See, people, what you have to understand is it's not uncommon for the officers to misinterpret your statement or to take your statement and try to put a spin on it and make you look guilty, even in situations where a person is entirely innocent, completely innocent. Exercise your right to remain silent. This is the best thing you can do to safeguard your rights. Trick number 1. Share your side of the story. When the police invite you to share your side of the story during an interrogation, you need to be very cautious. This is a deception tactic. Professional interrogators, they may initially create a comfortable atmosphere, but the minute they get enough information to use against you, the atmosphere will change, their tone will change, they'll start being aggressive or more assertive with you, and you'll feel backed into a corner. And the best way to avoid any of this is to invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and ask for an attorney. Law enforcement officers routinely like to play it calm and cool until they get a person in the interrogation room. And then they pepper them with rapid-fire questions. Some are confusing on purpose. A lot of the questions will make a person feel threatened or backed in a corner or feel as if they must respond. Don't fall for it. Just keep your mouth closed. I know I'm saying that over and over again. It's like beating a dead horse, but it's the most important thing you can do if the police are attempting to interrogate you. Invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And guess what? Remain silent. Just shut up. There are times, however, when the law enforcement officers want to interrogate a person and you run into Friendly Bob, the Friendly Bob officer. He'll make jokes, offer you a snack, offer you a drink. Don't fall for it. You need to be extra careful of this officer or this sort of officer. As soon as the Friendly Bob officer elicits information that he can use against you, his tone and demeanor will shift, and you'll be like a deer in headlights. So contrary to what the officers may say or what anybody may suggest, telling your side of the story is not something you want to do in an interrogation room, especially without a lawyer. Most lawyers will tell you when it's time to tell your side of the story, we will tell it for you in court, or you will get to tell it in court. The second way police try to trick people is by telling you, this is an off-the-record conversation. This is a conversation between me and you. You keep it real with me, I'll keep it real with you. Just tell me your side of the story. Tell me what's going on. This is completely off the record. And if you have anything of value, we'll go on the record. There are no off-the-record conversations, people. They're recording, they're listening, they're making notes. Anything you say can and will be used against you, even if it's quote unquote off the record. There's no such thing. Off the record will have you behind bars. The third trick police use is telling you they're not going to use your words against you. Now, if you listen to your Miranda rights when they're read to you, one of the things they're required to tell you is anything you say can and will be used against you. If there's any suggestion that by an officer that what you tell him is going to remain between you and him, it's not true. In fact, police officers will interpret, manipulate, or connect your statements to establish probable cause to arrest you and have you charged with a crime. Trick number 4, help us and we will help you. When law enforcement suggests that cooperating will lead to them speaking to the judge or the prosecutor on your behalf, you need to exercise caution. In reality, this promise is rarely fulfilled. Detectives often use this tactic of saying, will speak to the judge or the prosecutor on your behalf. But the truth is, judges rarely, if ever, intervene when a person is being interrogated by a detective. And in fact, the prosecutor typically isn't involved at this point of the case. So you can't rely on that. If anybody is going to speak to the prosecutor or the judge on your behalf, it will be your attorney. Wait on your attorney to speak to whoever needs to be spoken to on your behalf. It ain't the police. They're not going to speak on your behalf. Number 5, the breath test. Now, this typically only applies to traffic situations when a law enforcement officer has you pulled over for a DUI or a DWI. When offered a breath test by a police, be cautious. They'll claim they're only doing the test to determine your level of sobriety and to ensure that it's okay to release you and let you drive home. The truth is, they're simply looking for additional evidence to support arresting you for a DUI or DWI. You have the right to decline a breathalyzer test, and unless you've had absolutely nothing at all to drink, I would recommend you decline submitting to a breathalyzer test. You don't want to provide evidence that can and will be used against you in a court of law, and a breathalyzer test is evidence that can and will be used against you in a court of law. Trick number 6 is when law enforcement officers claim they found your fingerprints at the scene of a crime. You need to be extremely cautious and doubtful of this suggestion. First of all, if the crime recently occurred, even if fingerprints were recovered, chances are they haven't been analyzed. They haven't been sent to a crime lab to match or compare to your prints or prints in a database or any other prints. They may have prints, but if it's in close proximity to when the crime occurred, there's no way to say it's your prints. If presented with this argument, just understand that it's just a tactic they're using to put pressure on you to talk. If they have prints, you talking to them is not going to affect the prints. The prints are going to be analyzed at some point. The best thing you can do is hire a lawyer and let your lawyer deal with the fingerprints. If they genuinely had incriminating evidence, such as fingerprints, you would likely be arrested immediately. Trick number 7 is police claiming they have an eyewitness. When confronted with the claim that there's an eyewitness placing you at the scene of the crime, exercise skepticism. See, law enforcement officers are permitted to lie to you, and their right to lie has been upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, you don't get to lie to them. It's a federal crime, and you can be charged with a crime at the state level. So, although you're not allowed to lie to law enforcement, they are allowed to lie to you or mislead you as part of their investigation. So claims of fingerprints, DNA, eyewitnesses, all of this, they can lie. They can create lies if that's going to help them elicit information from you. If there are eyewitnesses putting you at the scene of a crime, you're going to be arrested. They don't need you to confirm or deny the allegations being made by the eyewitness. If there's an eyewitness testifying that you did the shooting, you did the robbery, you did the theft, you're going to be arrested. And you'll have to sort it out later with your lawyer. So, guess what? Keep your mouth closed, sort it out later with your lawyer. Trick number 8 is when law enforcement are trying to search your property. Oftentimes they'll say, hey, we just want to have a look, or if you didn't do anything wrong or you don't have any evidence of a crime, why not just agree to the search? When an officer requests to search your property, repeat these words. Officer, I do not consent to a search of my vehicle or property. Even if they claim they can get a warrant in a few minutes, say, okay, please get your warrant, and when you present me with the warrant, I will comply with the warrant to search my property. If they had enough evidence to get a warrant, chances are they would show up with the warrant. There are times, however, where law enforcement will show up without a warrant, and they're able to get a judge on the phone to authorize a search of your person or property. Now, that doesn't mean you should forego and waive your right to refuse a search. You should do that and require them to get a warrant. If you allow the police to search your property without a warrant, you're basically waiving your right to later challenge an illegal search or illegally obtained evidence. So remember the statement, officer, I do not consent to a search of my person or property. Now, the reality is we all live in the real world where there are times when law enforcement ignores our rights. So the officers may gently put their foot in the door to keep you from closing your door, or they may barge on in and ignore your rights and violate your rights. If they do that, do not try to stop them, do not resist, do not argue. State that you don't consent and get out of the way and comply with them. You can't win with the officers at the scene of an incident. That's gonna have to be done later in court with a lawyer fighting for you. Yes, they'll violate your rights. Yes, they may rough you up. The worst thing you can do is escalate the situation. Even if your rights are violated, you need to remain calm. Make notes if you can, record it if you can. If you can't, make mental notes. If you're able to record the incident, whether via audio or video, if you can't record, there are situations where the officers will do everything in their power to make sure you don't have the ability to record them. Just make a note, be firm, state you don't consent, and get out of their way and let your lawyer deal with your rights being violated on another day. Trick number 9 comes into play when you're not by yourself. When the officer stops a vehicle or enters a home and there's more than one person, they'll typically separate you and question you individually. In this routine, one of the things they do to instill fear or fright in the people is to allege that your friend or your family member already confessed or already said you did X, Y, and Z in an attempt to get you to open up and talk. Everybody in the vehicle or home or boat or wherever you may find yourself needs to invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Tell the officers you have nothing to say without the presence of a lawyer. There's only a few things you're required to do, so it's important that you do give your name, you do give your address. If you're in a vehicle, give proof of insurance and registration. Now, when the officer gets to asking where you're coming from, where are you going, or do you have any drugs in the car, you don't have to answer those questions. You can invoke your Fifth Amendment right. They may search the car anyway, but you do not have to answer these questions, and you should not answer these questions. Now, we've covered a good bit of scenarios with respect to these 9 tricks law enforcement officers like to use to trick you. 9 tricks to trick you. You can avoid all of these by hanging on to these 2 rights. Number 1 is your right to remain silent. Number 2 is your right to not consent to a search of your person or your property. Those are 2 very important rights. If you don't remember any other constitutional rights, you need to remember those. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to refuse a search of your person or your property. And you should exercise those rights if you are the subject of a criminal investigation. If you found this video useful, please subscribe and stay tuned for my weekly videos.